So as the saying goes, the nepotism will continue until we get the views. It's not really a good saying, but you just got to give it a shot, right?
Sure.
The guest today's guest is another Ranger Bat boy.
Oh man.
I know you're. I don't know. Let's see, we've had a few,
Yeah.
but
You can't get rid of us.
you
You
can't get
can't.
rid of us. You know what
Nope.
I mean? Like the hey,
Like
look,
cockroaches.
in soft, the age of the seal is over. The age of the ranger is here because we definitely are the orcs of special operations. Like
That
unga
is.
bunga unga bunga.
Yeah. That's the first time I've heard anybody describe it, but it is also the greatest description I've heard, especially to a pop culture reference. So
Yeah,
I
like
appreciate that.
good. At least it's. I didn't get to go to second bat. You're a second bat guy, but Cameron, you've been around a bit. You've seen some things since you left the military.
Yes.
This podcast ranges from philosophy to gun culture to tactics and techniques to
Hmm.
a whole bunch of things. But I've been looking forward to having you on as a guest. There are going to be introductions that I'm going to miss about you.
Okay.
So give me the audience and whatever the long and short of the last 10 years of your life.
Okay. Long and short. It's kind of hard. How about a medium? Can I
We'll
do
just
that? Yeah.
okay. As long as
I'll give you the LinkedIn bio real quick.
sure, LinkedIn bio it is.
All right. So thanks for having me, Forrest. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk with you. I was at Second Ranger Battalion since I exited high school. Right, that was like my plan. So I spent 4.5 years active duty. Just basically did one hump over in Syria. Just some overseas training missions. Like they did 4 months in Korea, a month in Germany. So nothing too crazy. Then war came to an end. I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to pursue other things because, as you know, orcs without a purpose just die. So I went over to the National Guard side while I was pursuing my schooling because military's always been part of my identity, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit. So wanted to maintain relationships. Did another 4.5 years in the California National Guard. Was activated during some riots, so I got to do some things in the Guard, which was cool. Went to Pepperdine, got a degree in business, and then I spent the last 3 years traveling the world, making a TV show for Netflix called Toughest Forces on Earth. And I got to work with 8 different special units from around the globe, specializing in each of the respected environments. So I got a lot of exposure to some things I knew really well. So a lot of exposure to probably even more exposure to things that I've never done in my life, which was, an awesome experience. So now it is live on Netflix. All season 1 is. So if you're listening to this, check it out so I can get a season 2 and feed my cats. But yeah, that's pretty much the nitty gritty since exiting the military. I joined in 2014, and technically I got out July of was it last July, so 23. So I guess just under 9 years total if you want to combine them both.
Now, I'm very excited to announce the first official sponsor of the Redacted Culture Cast. Obsidian Arms is one of those companies that reflects the many facets of gun culture. Not only are their firearms frequently found on competition fields like USPSA and 3Gun, but they are a Minnesota-based, US-sourced original equipment manufacturer. Obsidian Arms makes their own punch and tool kits for the amateur and professional gunsmith out of Little Canada, Minnesota, that come with a lifetime warranty. Whether it is fine parts that require a Swiss machine, or you're in the design phase and are looking for an American machine shop that is in tune with the needs of gun culture, go check out Obsidian Arms at obsidianarms.com. Thank you, and now back to the show. Sure. Okay, that makes sense. It's funny because you got in right as I got out, and I got out at the same time at the time where we thought all the war was over.
Yeah.
So, and that's exactly what happens. Is to those who are like I sometimes wonder. There's a certain sphere of people who I wouldn't say that are aware, because that's just such a derogatory statement, but the whole Syria conflict is kind of boggling to me, because I think I was in school. I think I was in college when when Syria happened, and just know, like, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about how we were there. It's really strange, like how we got there, why we were in Syria, what we were doing in Syria, what was the whole point. And yet I know people who've now been to Syria, and
Do
it's
they give you
like,
the same answer as what you just said?
I mean, you can. It's
I
just
mean, that was it, dude. I spent
yeah,
months there, and I had no idea what was going on the entire time.
jeez,
It was so multi-dimensional. There was like, you're like, oh, what's going on over there, and it would be a multitude of things.
yeah,
You know.
I was having a conversation with a friend about this, and we're another veteran guy, and the strange thing that we were talking about was he kind of was on like the public relations intel-ish side of
Mhm.
the coin, and he was talking about a lot of bigger picture issues,
Yeah.
especially Iraq, Afghanistan. Like, we were even laughing about how there's a very high likelihood that we theoretically crossed paths in 2010, but but what the issue was is I remember getting into Ranger Battalion, and this is, I'm going to pull this out into kind of a gun culture conversation
Mhm.
about how, but the thing is, I had been through basic training, airborne school, RIP, and we were now new privates at Ranger Battalion. I was a 375 guy. I always thought I was going to be a 275 guy, but then I got 375, which is probably why I didn't
Yeah, you
re-enlist.
seem like a 275 guy.
Dude, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah,
I've got three more is what it is before I
it is what
expire
it is.
my middle aged manhood. But um but like, we were learning things like, what is the muzzle velocity of an M4, and what is the weight of an M4, and it's like, it kind of
Mhm.
didn't matter because we were using Daniel defense rifles anyway, so it wasn't the
Yeah,
same, and but you know what I mean? Like,
I
what's the
gotcha.
cyclic rate of a M249? All useful information. What we never learned was, what's the AO? Where are we going? What are we
Yeah.
doing here? What's the
Mhm.
objective? What does it look like? Like, it was odd. No one told me. No one, my team leaders never talked to me about, which is possibly that they didn't know either, that, like, okay, so, like, who's AQ1, and, like, this would be like a target package,
Mhm.
or what is the Haqqani network, or what is the what are the things that we're doing in this area? Like, we're going to Kandahar, but no one at, but from the time that we started the training cycle till we got to Afghanistan, no one decided to have a conversation with the platoon about what was this deployment about. And so it's just like, Ranger just go target, hit
Yeah.
house, go back to sleep,
I guess
pick up
that's why they
plates.
called it a vacation, because usually a lot of people on vacation, they don't have a plan. They just go there and enjoy it.
Fair, I guess
Yeah.
so, but it was just, there was no area study, no,
Sure.
like, there's no, like, the map. I had to learn the map of Afghanistan by myself, and it's just like, okay, this is the plan. I guess it just, very strange thing to do is that there was no big picture presented to us, at least at that time, and
Yeah.
so it's odd to hear it reflected with you in Syria, but
Oh, it is. Yeah. I mean, this is definitely, I can tell you've had a lot of time to think about this because, in the moment, I don't think, and this was my personal experience, I was like, I didn't care what's going on over here.
sure,
Like my entire, I guess, motivation to like make it that far, get to that point, being in Ranger Regiment was just to be there.
yep,
And it's like, I mean, that's part of the culture. They're really good at making a specific type of product.
mm-hmm.
So, I was just wanting to go to combat. I was like, that's all I care about. And
Yep.
unfortunately, I missed two deployments. I showed up to Bravo Company 275 right as my platoon left for Bath. I think I missed it by like 2 weeks. And
Ah,
then so I was new guy once, and then platoon gets back 4 months later, new guy 2.0.
yep.
Yeah, so it's like just as I thought I was getting somewhere,
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
all gets stripped away.
You'll find this wild. I did 3 deployments before I did 1 training cycle.
Wow.
It
You
sounds
know,
ridiculous, doesn't it?
it is.
Yeah.
See, I did like 6 training cycles for one deployment. It was, you know,
You were so
yeah,
sharp.
yeah,
That knife point was so
it
razor
was
edge
there.
sharp that you could probably see through people's eyes and just
Oh
know.
yeah, it's why my
Well,
doctrine is so good. It's because I would just sit there and read TMs, read ATPs, literally, as a team leader, I still had my Ranger School handbook in my pocket. Like that's all because man, it's like looking back, I mean, it wasn't as bad as the 90s Rangers. After Somalia, there was just that point of nothing. And we always told them, we're like, oh yeah, 90s Rangers, best trained, least experienced, great guys. And for me, that was it. I missed Afghanistan right when I got there. I did a training cycle. They're like, okay, you guys are going to Korea. And I'm like, wow, this
that's
sucks.
yeah, yeah.
But I totally enjoyed my time over there, military experiences. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, now I'm moderately jealous because Korea's a place that I've wanted to go to,
Oh yeah, it
especially.
was amazing. Yeah, I can't
It,
wait till I'm old and weathered and I'm wearing my Korea National Defense ribbon hat like a salty old veteran at the American Legion.
you got to do it.
You got to do it, dude. I found it too. They make them. I'm like, no way. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, of
Yeah,
course, like if it's there, somebody makes it, and if
of
they don't
course.
make it, I'm sure. Like, what is it, Blue Falcon? There's some
Yeah, they can make
company.
it. You just got to ask them.
Yeah, they got it. What's their what's the rest of their name? They just make the funniest stuff. So
I'm actually not familiar. Blue Falcon is like
there's
apparel.
no there's this company. There's this it's an Instagram brand as far as I know that just like it makes all of this military stuff, but it's all like a joke and it's
I see.
absolutely hilarious. Like peacetime, like peacetime
Oh, I
something or
got you. Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
you know or
What's the
like
guys that work at JRTC that never deploy and like that whole fake village or whole fake AO and they're like a Tropia veteran?
yeah, there's things
Yeah.
like that. Like it's or they'll or of course they'll like you'll have like uniform stuff like what's it, Lance Corporal for the
Yeah.
Marine Corps, but instead of like cross swords or whatever, it's dicks.
Yeah.
So it's it's
Yeah,
just
no, I think I know. Yeah, there's another they're like Pizza Co or something and they turn every unit insignia to something with
yeah,
dick and balls. Yeah.
yeah, that's unfortunate. It's
It
not
is.
whatever this but it's still funny. So
It is
let's
very funny.
but that's it's also like the inside joke of the military. So
It is.
let's kind of start cutting in a little bit to talking about before, during, after Ranger Battalion and how that reflected on how you looked at it and then how you look at it now that you've trained with all of these different special operations
Yeah.
units.
Okay.
So how did you so before you joined the military, one of the differences between you and I, one of the differences that you and I might have had is that before I joined the military, while we were still in the internet age, not a lot of information was available to a country boy in Minnesota
Sure.
on Ranger Battalion. So
Yeah.
like if you came to me at 18 years old, I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between Green Beret, Delta Force, Ranger Battalion, Navy SEAL. There wasn't MARSOC at the time, but like a force recon guy. I just didn't know. And so I ended up in Ranger Battalion kind of by accident in the sense of it was Army. Army was sort of how I got there. And I didn't want to be a regular dude. So I
Yeah.
was like, oh, well, I can't be Green Beret because I'm not 21. That was the rule at the time, or at least that's what my recruiter told me. So I
Yeah.
was like, all right, Ranger Battalion let's do
Yeah.
Ranger Battalion, And they're like, oh, we don't have any slots. And so I walked out of the office, and he's like, okay, we found a slot. Like,
Yeah.
imagine that, like,
Yeah,
ooh,
crazy.
look
Yeah.
at this guy's a magician. He just pulls
Yeah.
them out of the hat. Like,
I know. You just
okay.
tell them no and they do anything. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. How about big wheel mechanic? That's more like you.
a big wheel mechanic.
Yeah, no, that's an actual job. Yeah, I went to airborne school with one. I'm like, the wheels are bigger than you. That's crazy.
See, I was thinking of the kid's toy.
Oh. Like the Tony or the Tonka trucks. Yeah.
No, I was thinking of like the kid's toy as in like the big wheel. It's like a
Oh, yeah,
tricycle
the
with a giant.
tricycle with the
Yeah,
giant front wheel on it.
yeah. I'm a big wheel
Yeah.
mechanic.
Big wheel mechanic. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah. Someone's got to make that into a sticker or a patch.
that's awesome. Great idea.
Yeah,
Um,
whatever the 88 mic or something like that.
yeah, the truck drivers.
Hmm.
That's a
So,
job. Sorry,
oof.
total. Yeah, that's a rough job.
Yep. So, what was your impression of Ranger Battalion before you got there?
I think I'm in the same boat as you on this one.
Okay.
I knew that I wanted to join the military from a young age, right? That was my goal. I got, C's, get degrees in a diploma sense in high school. So like I wasn't trying to go to college. So I just was like, I just need to graduate. And a week later, I shipped off to basic training. But in that process, I didn't know which branch I wanted to do. I didn't know where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. All I knew was infantry, some sort of infantry job, like combat. That's what I wanted to do. So I initially went into the Marine Corps recruiter because it was just the closest to my house, and I guess I was lazy because I didn't want to ride my bike any further. But yeah, I went in there and they sold me this idea, and I had a force recon contract all lined up, like I was all depped in. But then when my mother got involved and my parents got involved, they're like, "Did you even like look up anything?" The internet, I joined in 2014, so the internet was a thing.
Hmm.
But there wasn't a lot of stuff on special operations, during my time. But my mother just showed me the budgets per military branch, and she's like, "You have the Army, which is the highest budget, and then you have the Marine Corps, which is the lowest budget. You choose." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've always been a fan of gear and equipment," and I'm like, "I don't want to use Vietnam stuff, so I guess I'll join the Army." So I walked into the Army recruiter, and that was it. I took my abs fab. I went in with two guys at the time I was buddies with, and yeah, we all enlisted together. One of them got an infantry contract, but my buddy and we scored high enough to get the option 40, and I didn't even know that was a thing. He had to tell me like, "Oh, would you like to go Ranger?" And I'm like, "I don't even know what that is, man. All I know is they're on Call of Duty. That's all I know." I thought it was like these mystique, these tiers, or something you need to
Mm.
put your time in at the bottom level, and then you can just go. I didn't know you can just jump in feet first. Luckily, one of my recruiters was an infantry guy at Fort Lewis, so he was at Second ID, so he had a little bit of the idea of how Rangers work. So he's like, "Yeah, you go to basic airborne, and then you go to RASP, and then you become what's known as a baby ranger." And I'm like, this is the only person I've ever heard in my military career say that. So I'm like, okay, now reflecting on it, I'm like, he didn't know anything. He's like, then you become a baby ranger, and then you have to go to ranger school, and then you become an actual ranger. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I can do that. So that was my initial exposure. I got the contract, and I was like, okay, I didn't know what to train. I was a dancer at the time, which was
Yeah.
interesting to my background. I spent my starting off in middle school. My mother enlisted. My mother enrolled my sister and I in hip hop dance. I was in a breakdancing class, and she was in hip hop because she wanted us to have something in common as siblings instead of just hating each other. To you have like a general interest to grow and become close, and it worked. Yeah, we did. I love my sister, and we became really good. So that was kind of like my fork in the road, which was like, if the dance thing doesn't work out, I'm gonna immediately join the military. And like the dance thing was working out, and then I turned 18, and I'm like, screw this, I'm gonna go in the military. This is like my dream. This is just a side quest. But yeah, I
I
mean, it ended up
I
working out.
I got to stop you there for a minute. There seems
Do
to
it.
be now maybe this is just my own closed-mindedness, but there seems to be this impression this impression of like the military kind of individual as extremely one-dimensional.
Oh,
Like
you mean like a D1 athlete?
sure,
Yeah.
I'm not a sports ball guy.
Yeah,
Like
me neither, man.
you know what I mean? So maybe I don't. So the reference is lost on both of us. Thanks for bringing it up.
No, sorry. I've heard it. Someone say, "Are you D1 athlete?" And I'm like, I don't even
Yeah,
D. I don't have D's. I'm a guy.
D, yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Ooh.
So I don't know. But the point I'm saying is that I've heard like because I kind of enlisted in the baby killer era, which where like
Yeah.
like veterans were like military guys were like
Yeah. Good
this
for you
is
for still going with it,
well, I mean, here's the other thing too. Like you're 18 years old and you're seeing this guy like rant and rave about all veterans are all just baby killers, and then you realize he has like a room temperature IQ and
Yeah.
also might be like a pedo or something. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I don't care about you know what I mean. Like
Yeah,
it's
he
just like
dodged the draft in Vietnam. Yeah.
it's just like I legitimately like there's a lot of opinions out there. It doesn't mean that you need to pay them all so much attention. But the point that
Yeah.
I'm saying in my thought is like the you bring up the side you're like it's kind of odd I was a dancer. It's like, yeah, I was a musician, I was a piano player,
Yeah.
and I did a whole bunch of stuff like in well, I wasn't a piano player. I played piano when I was in high school,
Yeah.
and I was a musician, and I was definitely looking at going that direction of like Midwest emo band.
Hell
Right.
yeah.
And so I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Little
yeah.
crab core action. Yeah.
Sure. And then what ended up happening was I ended up in my small town joining the military. And to those who know me, there's a certain exemption knew me at the time, but like this is so long ago now.
Mhm.
To those who knew me, I don't think they were as surprised as much, but to the general audience of the small town, it was a bit of a surprise. They're like, you're 150 pounds, 6 foot. You're this skinny little kid. Like, why
Yeah.
would you?
What are you
join the
gonna do?
military? You
Yeah.
don't play football. I'm like, yeah, I don't. I write and okay. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
So-
got you, man. Yeah.
like and then the stereotypical thing, you do the ASVAB, and they're like, you're too smart for this. Well,
Yeah.
because I'm good at academics. I'm on the other side. Like academics is something that I'm good at, but
Mm.
but I don't see it as I no longer see it as something. What would you describe as like a meritocracy of character in an absolute sense? Like there are some people who will look at like, well, if you don't get A's, you're not a good human being, and it's like, no, that's not how I think about it.
It's
It's
not
like
true
if,
at all.
but if you're going to go to school,
Yeah.
if you're going to go to college, you probably should. And getting A's is part of your path line. Like do it, but just
Yeah.
don't tell me you're an A grade student and get C's.
Yeah. No.
Don't tell me you're an airborne ranger, but you're in the 82nd. It's just
Yeah.
don't lie about
Don't
who you
do
are.
that. Yeah. Just don't lie. It's easy. What made you join then? Was it like just a random wing? Because I have some friends that, like on the same path. Like the guy I started out with, Izzy, that I used to do all my shift fire videos and I did pop culture field manual with. He was one of those guys that just like randomly joined the military. He was got accepted into Canadian Circus Academy for like aerialists, and it was too expensive, so he joined the military instead.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
what was it for you?
my motivation was twofold. One of them was I always knew that I wanted to go see war,
Yeah.
even from a young age. Like this is if you want to get down to the probably the close the less surface level element of it is that I had witnessed a repeated experience of people talking about things but having no skin in the game.
Sure.
So let's talk about like I was 11 when 9/11 happened. I think I was delivering papers
Wow.
for a paper route. It didn't really matter, it's like it's not like I had a great cognition of it, but it
Yeah.
was people talking about say war and making moral evaluations of combat without having any skin in the game.
Yeah.
It's so that was frustrating, but also I grew up on movies like The Last of the Mohicans, The Patriot,
Of course. Classics.
Braveheart, and there was a little bit of that. My grandfather was a veteran of World War II, and both of my grandfathers were a veteran of World War II, and then one of my grandfathers was a veteran as well of Korea, where he ended up being a POW for 3 years.
Jeez.
So I grew up on these stories of like other in our day and age would be nearly unfathomable, except for now I know
absolutely.
people who have seen similar issues in different theaters.
Hmm.
And so ultimately, one, I knew that I wanted to go to war. Um, the negative pressure on the subject was that I was attending a community college at the time. Because again, like I was saying, like academics is something I was fairly decent at. So
Hmm.
when I was 16 years old, I started going to college. Um, as a high school student, there's a program in Minnesota called PSEO that at that time that allowed you to do that. If your grades were of a certain level, you could start knocking out your associate's degree. And
Hmm.
so I had started working on that. I actually knew friends who graduated high school and with their associate's degree. It's kind of impressive. So I was working on that, and it's just I couldn't see a degree in college that was in any way, shape, or form meaningful to me.
Sure.
There was just nothing there. It was and I have an allergy to certain levels of mediocrity, so I don't want to be a that's probably the elitist in me.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
but then the last thing that ended up being um, the last thing that ended up being the motivator for me to join the military was basically an identity crisis. Like I was graduating high school, chronically depressed in the Midwest, and I wasn't chronically depressed. I just had this, goofy whatever. But I was like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I didn't know where I wanted to go. But I figured, you know what? If I go be a ranger, I will be a ranger. Then I will have an identity. And so I joined the military out of that, out of this sort of desperation for meaning.
Okay. I think that's a very, I feel like a lot of people just forget how important that time is when you graduate high school. For me, that's like a make or break it right there.
Huh. What do you
I don't
mean
know.
make or break what?
It's because you have all these times, and whenever somebody, there's a younger guy that like asks me, "Oh, I want to be a ranger or anything." The first thing I tell them is to enjoy their time before it, right? Because in high school or that time where this is the last time you're going to have like close to zero responsibilities other than just attend your classes and get good grades. Like after it's done, we move off to college, which is a little bit higher level, but like that identity as a child, I think, or like as an innocent, is stripped away after high school.
Huh.
That's why we continue to make pop culture movies about it, like, oh, the good old days in high school. That's why some people can't. You probably know some dudes you went to high school with that like still wear their high school garments and like still talk about the times on the football team. And I'm like, dude,
Nope.
like that was your
I
peak,
I
you
I
know?
I understand the story, but I don't have just for context.
Yeah.
One I was homeschooled, and
Oh.
two so
Don't
no
worry, I was homeschooled too for sophomore year, so I get
yeah.
it. Yeah.
But like there is one I was homeschooled, and two I live on the other side of the country from where I grew up right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So but there is this odd when I go back to visit my hometown, other than visiting certain friends
Hmm.
and my family, which there's a lot of warmth there,
Hmm.
the area feels like depression to me.
Yes.
And so it's like, oh, and some of these things it's not to be irrational. The '08 financial crash devastated that area.
Hmm.
And I get it, dude. No banker or finance mogul is ever going to pay the consequences for this small town losing a third of its businesses.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hey, look, you're too rich to be held accountable. That's fine. Before God, we might have a different experience,
Yeah.
there is there is this little oddity. And to be clear, there's a number of people that I know who have um even some of them are dear friends who, while they don't live in the glory days of like high school and college, but they've lived a rather wonderful life, staying home and doing the small town thing.
Yeah.
And while so I actually I'm trying to phrase how this in other ways other than I deeply respect them, because if you were to look at their laurels and accolades, it wouldn't be a long list of Ranger Battalion,
Yeah, of course.
PhD, world traveler. It's like, oh, you've probably never left the state. Oh, you don't have any opinion on geopolitics. Oh, you don't have this list of achievements, but you know what they do have? A stable home, a wise
Yeah.
family, a meaningful connection to their community. Wow, maybe I messed up.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting perspective
Hmm.
because that part you brought up about like having this weird feeling, like going back there that like feels like depression. I don't know. I feel that too. And, thinking about it, I had a very happy childhood.
Ah.
My parents loved me. I was supported in everything I did.
Hmm.
Growing up, my first real like taste of adversity was joining the military.
Yep.
I had a great childhood. I'm not gonna sit here and, talk
So
about experiences. My mom threw a dictionary at me one time, boo-hoo, because I was acting up.
yeah,
That's not adversity. That's
yeah.
being disciplined. It's
Let's. So when you were in the military, then are your parents still together?
no,
Okay, so they broke.
no. They got divorced when I was like in middle school. Like that
Okay,
was rough, but
okay,
it's not
but
adverse in my bad. I don't know. Maybe I have a
when
hard ass definition. Sorry, go.
sure, when you were in Ranger Battalion, did that make you the anomaly, that you weren't like one of the other guys from like a hard childhood? Like, I was beat by my dad all the time. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I said I was a dancer, that's like,
sure.
oh, that was it. I remember the day I showed up.
Yep.
Do you remember the draft, the private draft? Did you guys have that at 375? So
Uh, maybe kind of.
they would
So
have, we did
I
this at 275,
okay.
where when, you'd show up to your battalion and they'd assign all the guys the company when you're in processing. And the day you'd show up at your company,
Yep.
you would all stand in a line and
I
like
do
all the
remember this.
leadership from each platoon would be there.
I
And
do
it'd go
remember
down the
this.
line and ask everybody a weird question. Like if you could be any type of food, what would you be and why?
Sure.
Just
They
weird
asked.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, they asked us what was our PT score in
Yeah.
basic training.
Oh yeah, they asked us a bunch of weird questions. They're like, "What'd you do before the military?" And everyone was like, "I was an athlete." One guy said, "I just played video games," and that like wasn't a good answer.
Nope.
And yeah, and I said, I didn't know what to say because it's not the fact that I was a dancer. I was a good dancer. Like my
Mm-hmm.
company, we won national. We were a nationally ranked team. We like traveled around the
Mm-hmm.
country and performed and won. So like I wasn't like, oh, I'm a dancer, and then like Napoleon dynamited it.
Mm-hmm.
I was decent, so they're like, what are you? And I'm like, oh, I was a dancer, and that spread like wildfire.
I can understand why.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even in RASP, I remember we were at the marksmanship week and we were all training, and the RASP cadre asked me what I did. I was like, oh, I was a dancer. So they brought me in front of everybody and they had me dance in front of everyone with no music. And like I did good. I
Yeah.
think they really tried to make me uncomfortable and make me, basically make fun of me, but I wouldn't let them
Sure.
because I was good. So they would always be like, all right, they'd leave me alone after I danced because I think they thought it was like going to be like, dance, you stupid monkey,
Yeah.
here, entertain the masses. And,
Yeah.
I would, and I loved it because this is what I've been thriving on for the past
Y-
decade.
Do you think
Um,
that having a background in dancing, like because it's for audiences, right?
yeah,
Do you think that helped you with your, not necessarily like interpersonal communication skills, but not having the same uh do you, how like, cuz to take anybody, to single them out, especially in any sort of selection process or any sort of military unit, to be singled out and expected to do something in front of everybody
it's
is
pressure.
kind of, there's a lot of pressure there. Do you
Yeah.
think that your background is in professional dance helped you perform under pressure in front of an audience?
I think so. I think it actually amplified my ability to do that. Because you know
Wonderful.
how much balls it takes to go in front of, a crowd of hundreds of people and do things that, sometimes like what if you messed up a flip? What if you messed up a move? Like you have potential of injury, you have potential of embarrassment.
Mhm.
It's all choreographed and, it's
Mhm.
dangerous too, especially when you're doing flips on a elevated surface, you could fall off.
Mhm.
So I think it absolutely did. And not to mention it built confidence. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of dudes lack confidence in that space. Like they can do the PT, but the second you like public speaking is a big
Oh
fear
yeah.
for a lot of people, and it's always been one of my strengths. Like I have no problem going up into a crowd and speaking to people. I mean, I'll fumble my words, but then I'll make a joke and make fun of myself, and kind of make everybody easy.
Yeah.
um, but I think it definitely did prepare me for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have no problem at all, even back then, just being the center of attention. It's almost one of my downfalls,
Okay.
uh, because I do enjoy being the center of attention, and
Fair.
I'm also a people pleaser. Like if I think someone doesn't like me, I will single them out and immediately go
Mm-hmm.
up to them and introduce them and be like, "Hey, dude, like my name's Cameron. If you need anything, just be super nice.
Mm-hmm.
Just be super nice." Because I'm like, it's kind of hard to hate people that are really nice to you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes you hate them even more, but I don't know. I just want to make sure everybody's good, and I don't know if that's like the entertainer in me or the dancer in me, just making sure the masses are entertained, everybody's happy. Um, yeah, it's a good question, but yeah, to answer your question in a long-winded statement, I definitely think it helped in that type of situation.
All right, so then let's continue on in the story. So
Yeah.
it was dance or military. You went
Hmm.
military,
Yeah.
and then while you're in the military. So when you bring up the story, I recall we did have kind of a draft. Now, just as I have to be careful, I want to make sure that this is clear between you and I. Um, I went through RIP, not RASP,
Yeah. Not
and
rasp.
I went through well. Here's the thing too, and then but I went through in the tail end of RIP, kind
Okay.
of during Obama's surge era. So I had a very different experience than a normal Ranger Bat guy who went through RIP and had to go through the grueling experience of being weeded out
Yeah.
and what I ended up being a part of is what you might refer to as the tan beret giveaway, which was
Oh, is this like we need numbers?
we need numbers exactly. And so um as far as I understand at that time a normal RIP class started with about 125, graduated maybe 30, maybe 25, so you had a huge attrition rate.
Yeah.
And then our class started with 315ish and graduated 285.
Oh yeah. They probably were
So,
pissed about that, huh?
well, I mean there and it was catastrophic is what it was. And cuz all of us who graduated, none of us knew whether we made it or not. We're
Hmm.
just kind of like, "Oh, I just got shuffled through." Like we had to do hard things. Don't get me wrong. We had to do hard things. You had to go sleep in the cold at Coal Range, and
Yeah.
you had to go do land navigation. You had to go do a 12-mile ruck march under a certain amount of time. Not everybody passed it, but they were certainly shuffled through. And
Yeah.
so, like,
Oh, okay. That's
a lot of us, not most of us did. Most of us did pass things. Most of us, but the issue that I'm saying here is that it was the finer details that really would have made or break that really ended up coming out later.
yeah.
You cannot factory mill produce Rangers. You can't do it.
Mm-mm. No, it takes so much time. It takes so
And
much.
so you can't it is in an essence an artisan level development because you
Hmm.
have to develop all of these different things and one of those is independence. And the military can't figure this out because every time they give somebody independence, they have to take it away because they did something dumb and
Yeah.
then, oh, I can't have control.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, on that note, I think, especially with the recent experiences from like my show and working
mhm.
with a bunch of, different units with different selection processes, one thing throughout this entire experience, and like, I've always loved the Ranger Regiment. Obviously, there's some negatives with it. I think, like I said, they're really good at making a specific product. They are
Mhm.
very good at making a warfighter.
Mhm. Very
Like
much
you've
so.
you've probably heard the saying, like, we make good Rangers, we don't make good people.
Oh yeah.
Um, oh yeah, because some of the best Rangers I know were terrible people. Oh, they
Mhm.
were so bad. Um, but uh, but looking at all these other units that might have had like a 2 year selection, like my other co-host Ryan, who is a SEAL, we'd compare our experiences because I'm a firm believer that Buds is the hardest selection in the U.S. military physically, right? Like we didn't have to do as crazy stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I calculated the distance in Coal Range that I walked, and it was in those 4 days or what, 4 days, 5 days, 4 days, 3 nights. Like, we walked close to like 70, 80 miles over that with the land nav and hitting the wood line, like just averaging out. And me and my buddy Google mapped the distance of, how far we had to run. And we'd probably do that 15 times in a day. And it like equaled, close to 70, 80 miles over that entire thing.
Wow.
So I was like, well, that's kind of crazy. I mean, it's all a blur now, but,
Mm-hmm.
so like that's challenging. And once you make it past that, I think you got it in the bag. But, RASP isn't hard. I always tell people, I'm like, RASP is not hard. It's you're doing the standard and you're literally just treated like a private when you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like you play games with the cadre. They smoke you if you don't do the standard. It is no different than your life as a private when you get to the unit level. But it's only 8 weeks, and maybe I spent two months in pre-RASP and then 8 weeks in actual RASP. So like you want to call it 4 months in the selection, but you don't get a product yet. It takes years at the unit level to actually make that product. And then, you go off to Ranger School, which is another selection because that is, bless
Mm-hmm.
you, that is that's a make or break it if you want to stay.
Yep.
Because at my time, it was like you go to Ranger School once, and if you fail, I think we had Command Sergeant Major Boyers come in, and he was like, if you only get one shot at Ranger School now, it's there are no, you go until you make it. It's like you go once, and if you fail, you get RFest.
That's what it was supposed to be in our
Yeah.
era. Again, when I go back to when I look back at that time, it was supposed to be that in our era.
Hmm.
Um, it was supposed to be that way where you only get one shot at Ranger School, and if you don't make it, you're RFest. But I knew a handful of people.
Yeah, me too.
I knew a pretty and they all were the same human being. So
Yeah.
they were all the same, popular kid.
Really well liked in battalion. Oh, he's a really good guy. Let's give him another chance.
Yeah. Or like I should leave that part out.
Okay. But, back to it. We have this 8 week selection compared to Buds and
Mm-hmm.
SQT, which is, almost, and like the Q course with as well. Like these are almost 2 year selections, a year and a half change. It's 2 years before you even get to the unit. Comparing it, it's like, and then talking about our work days, like the average day as a Ranger versus the average day as a SEAL. Like he's like, oh yeah, we'd come in around 9 o'clock, we'd work out, then we would be home by 2 or 3, maybe even 12, depending. And I'm like, oh my God, you know what we did? I was like, we woke up at 5:30, formation 6, at the Ranger Creed, in the gym by 6:30, at work at 9, and then work till like 6, 7 o'clock at night. And you did a mandatory like 3 hours of hard skill training a day, Monday through Friday. And then if you had a night range, you're back at 3 o'clock in the morning, late call 9 the next day. And then you do it all over again until you become an alcoholic. And and I was like, okay. So then I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Like Ranger product is years of, years of training at the unit level versus like a lot of selections where you go, you 2 year selection, you get to the unit and you're like there. And now you're just integrated into advanced level courses. You're
Yeah.
just going like school to school to school, then deploy. And it's like you don't have time to master like basic fundamental stuff. Like I was a big proponent of, Rangers are the masters of the fundamentals, and that's what makes it so good because you can build upon those. If you lack
Mm-hmm.
those, you can't just stack shit on top. It just becomes shit.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a big revelation. And I'm like, I have a lot of respect for Ranger Regiment. There are very few units that are that good at what
Mm-hmm.
they do. And like Ranger Regiment is that good at what they did. Like comparing them to all the units I've worked with and the guys that I've, trained alongside. Yeah. Like I was like, wow, I was so happy to be part of that unit. Because nobody acts like that.
Yeah, there is a certain level when you think about it too. There's a
It's a
certain
cult.
amount of performance that comes out of taking 19-year-old kids
Yeah.
and turning them into very, very capable night raid performers,
Yeah.
and
It's weird.
there is a certain amount, and I can see that. So we've kind of brought this up a little bit. Let's bring it back down to identity, and
Yes.
like part of my reason of going to Ranger Battalion was this desire and pursuit of identity. Who am I? What is my purpose? What am I here to be? Oh, I'm going to go be a ranger. In the most critical way possible I can, or in the most critical way I can put it together, I chose to go into Ranger Battalion because I didn't know who I was, and believed that Ranger Battalion would give me an identity, and that's where I had problems, right?
Yeah.
So for you, you already came in with, well, you came in with a level of confidence
Hmm.
with with your background, but then Ranger Battalion, and well, how did your opinion, your perspective of Ranger Battalion change while you were there, especially when it came to identity? Like who people, what were people, and what did they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, a lot of my friends will say that I didn't really change
Mm,
as long as they knew me. Like my best friend Braden, we were team leaders together. We were in the same squad. He was in Deco, and then when they broke down Deco, I think it was like 2017, 2016. He came over to my company and joined my squad. And I remember him telling me, "When I met you, I hated you." He's like, "I hated you because you were he was a tab. I was a private at the time. I was about to leave for Ranger School, and they left for Iraq. My platoon did, and I was like, what private says, 'Hey, good morning. How are you doing? Hey, welcome to the squad. If you need anything, just let me know.'" Like, what private is nice to a tab?
mm,
Usually privates fear tabs. I was always nice to people. It was hard for me to like be a be an ass, I guess.
mm,
That I don't think that's changed about me. He still says, he's like, "Cam has not changed one bit." So I'm hoping that's a blessing there. But I have seen guys just get wrapped up in the whole persona, and it's taken me years to reflect on it.
mm.
Because the identity, right? I appreciate my past experiences, and I've had a couple hard conversations with guys that are still in, like my buddy Josh. I asked him, there's the 50th anniversary of 275 coming up, and I'm like, "Are you going?" I'm like, "I'm going, man. I can't wait to go." And he's like, "No, I'm good." And I'm like, "Whoa, you don't want to go?" And he's like, "A ranger was something I did. It's not who I am." And I was like, "Wow, that's dude. That you should put that on a poster. Like, that would help a lot of guys out, because it's it's kind of like that Marine saying, like, not as lean, not as green, but like still a Marine type of mentality. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, and like I respect that because that is we are held to a ginormous standard. I call it the curse of regiment,
Okay.
because when I left, um, the second anybody found out that you were in special operations or you were an army ranger, their expectations of you, if they knew what that was immediately up here, right? It
Sure.
wasn't like earning your keep. It was like performing to the level you think you can. That was at least my college experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I would get a C or a D or, not graduate, near the top of my class, that would be associated with Ranger Regiment.
Interesting. There's
And
a
yeah.
there's a passage in both the Bible and a saying by Baltasar Gracian that goes something like, they both are hinting at the same thing. It's like, don't, what is it, like, do not boast about your achievements before kings or whatever.
Mhm.
I can't remember it. I can't remember the biblical line, and I can't remember the exact quote from by Gracian, but it basically is this idea of like, don't let people know who you are and what you've achieved, lest they expect certain things out of you.
Yes.
Rather, let them be surprised at your performance,
Mhm.
which is something that I am characteristically bad at. So,
Yes. I mean, it's being a ranger is an amazing thing. You can't take that. I've never met anybody that's like airborne ranger. That's not a thing. That's not
hmm,
cool. So I think you should be proud of your achievements, and you should wear them with pride. The one thing I do have a problem with is the second you say that and you don't perform to the standard, that's a problem
yeah,
because now you're making the organization look terrible. Like, if I had some experiences in the National Guard meeting former Rangers, and like they would be like, "Yeah, Rangers are the best." They'd wear the scroll on their deployment thing, and we're like, "We are awesome. We're the best at what they do." But then that individual would not perform to standard, or they'd sham out, and it's like, how are you going to sit there and not be a representation, wear the scroll, on your shoulder, and just kind of be a POS, you know? To me,
Mm-hmm.
that's unsat. It's not like something you did, and if you harp on it all the time, that is your life now. Like that is your identity, right? Uh
Unsat. For those who are listening,
unsat.
unsat means unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
It means you are not meeting the standard. You are doing the bad thing. No, that's
Yeah.
hilarious. So I want to. I kind of. There's a couple things that I want to. I want to be able to continue moving on here. Not to
Yeah.
cut you short, but
No,
it's
please.
because there's one thing that I've enjoyed as I've been having guests on in the show is I'll listen to things that people have been on, and there's oftentimes a question that hasn't been asked that I can see someone working to, and I'm like, I want to ask that question that never gets
Ask
there.
it,
So I
please.
have my own, but there you go. So if you want to build a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory on the Redacted Culture Cast, what I do when I'm listening to people is like, there's a question I know that you can answer, but I want to be able to get it to you, but I got to work my way there.
Do it.
So the so before we get into that part, um, now that you've trained with all of these different units, right? And so, how has that changed your opinion, mind, and thought on the idea of training in general, gun culture, and caricaturistically, certain people within gun culture make a big deal about what training could or should be. Now, the military does this as well. What is a well-trained individual? Okay. Now that you've seen all of these different units, how has your opinion and thought on training changed?
That's a good question. Um, I mean, training is absolutely necessary to start it off with, right? That is something that I feel like for some skills, whether it's equipment or your level 1, your level 2 systems, right? Your plate carrier, your uniform, what type of boots? I feel like people go down the rabbit hole in that, and that's the wrong rabbit hole to go down. I think the one thing you cannot pick and choose is training. Now, how you conduct that training is another animal, right? Comparing like my experience in Malaysia, um, I think the U.S. military is, as far as influence, Western military influence is everywhere. It's in every single military. I went to 5 out of the 6 countries. Every single thing they did, I've seen before. And it's like, okay, that is some version of Western military influence and tactics and SOPs. One thing that I did see that isn't something we do at all, which was just like kind of a red flag to me, was when I was in Malaysia, they would do confidence shooting, and they would literally hold about probably like a 12-inch or a 14-inch in radius. Uh, or no, that's not radius, but a circle about
Yeah,
4.
yeah,
Yeah,
a
sorry,
diameter.
diameter.
Yeah.
Sorry, radius is half. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
said 7-inch radius. There we go. I went
Mm-hmm.
to college.
Not a circumference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But about 14-inch paddle, right? And they would hold it by their head. And then at 7 meters, a guy with an MP5 would put 2 rounds in that paddle.
Okay.
And they, and they do this multiple times, and they call it confidence shooting. And they're like, well, what takes more confidence than shooting live rounds a couple inches away from your buddy's face, between his legs, on top of his head?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay. Historically, the West has done very well in conflict. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
call numbers, Vietnam, we lost a lot of guys, but as time has progressed, tactics have changed, equipment has advanced. We did really well in Afghanistan. We did really well in Iraq.
America
Uh,
is good at war.
we are great at war.
We are
Okay.
very good at war. Like
Yeah.
you look at even the Ukrainian conflict, like and war is such a Pareto distribution where like a small group of people are extremely good at it,
Yes.
and when we talk about extremely, like the difference is massive.
Yeah.
Where like, but you're thinking the average. I think the best way I can even look at it, the best comparison, in is a near, like when you look at countries in warfare, is a basically untrained conscript in comparison to like American special operations. Like they're just so
Absolutely.
vastly different, and
Yeah.
you can't, you know.
And there's a lot of American special operations that are very good at war. They're very good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So, comparing that to what I'm seeing in Malaysia, which is like, okay, when I trained with CAG, like I didn't see them shooting live rounds at each other.
Mm.
And CAG was the pinnacle of anything I've seen. I thought Rangers were like amazing at CQB until I went to the CAG comp, did a CAG SU for 3 weeks with them and watched them do an HR takedown on a shoot house. And it absolutely blew my mind. Like it was, you could not compare any type of training I've seen.
Mm.
CAG is the best at what they do.
Yeah.
Like that's a no question thing.
Mm.
So after seeing that, and that's when I was in, and then going to Malaysia and seeing the confidence shooting, I'm like, well, why can we? How is it that we can perform at the level that we do, and assuming that all the safety risks are accounted for, right? We in the military, there's a risk assessment for everything.
Mhm.
In Malaysia, how can they shoot at each other within inches with live rounds, right? That's risque, if you ask me. They asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said absolutely not. You know? I was like, I am good. And I'm like, how can we perform at the level we do when we are not training to that level? Because that it takes a specific level to get there. And competency, I mean, it's called
Mhm.
confidence shooting for a reason. I am
Mhm.
confident that we can do that, but I'm also pretty sure we wouldn't want to because it costs a lot of money to create one special operations guy, and I would hate to lose one by accident.
And
Because
and you're gonna lose two though, because the
yeah,
guy pulling the trigger and the guy who's no longer with you, that's two.
exactly. Yeah, it's like when
So
one guy gets shot, 5 guys are out of the fight, because it takes 4 to carry him. So,
this is true, but also
yeah,
you know exactly how the American bureaucracy would be like, well,
absolutely.
you failed confidence shooting because you
Yeah.
shot your buddy, but
Yeah,
then
I guess you're
but I mean also in much more reality, like you failed to shoot, you failed the confidence shooting by
mhm.
create like you now that person's confidence is forever done. Like,
Yeah, right? They're like, "Oh, I
dude,
guess,
that guy's road to redemption is going to
yeah.
be like 9 years of like
Yeah. Oh, man, it's
serious
brutal.
trauma therapy
Yeah.
and some issues there.
Mhm. But the Malaysians were still really good at what they did,
Good.
right? They're,
Hmm.
as especially a third country or a third world country force, I was like very shocked at just how hard these dudes were. And super tough, really good in the jungle, just awesome.
Hmm.
Um, but going back to the US force, we take safety and we take risk very seriously. Like I remember we worked with the Navy EOD on one of the episodes, and they wouldn't I still had my, I was still in the National Guard at the time when we started filming. I had still had a government cat card, which
Mm.
is, for the listeners, it's literally your military ID, and they
Hmm.
would not let me hold a weapon. They would not let me hold a real weapon. They gave me a rubber ducky, or a shape in the Navy they call it. And I was like, "What?" And they're just like, "Yeah, it's insurance purposes." And I'm like, "I am literally in the military."
Hmm.
So the level of risk is high in the United States, but we still train to a specific level. Comparing that to like the type of training everybody can do. I'm not saying here let's go shoot your buddy on the flat range, but I think you can. I think to a certain level of training is achievable without putting yourself out there, and it will be beneficial because it's no training. I mean, training is better than no training, in at least in my perspective. And you
Hmm.
don't need to shoot a billion rounds to do it, right? I think as long as you can add some level of stress, I think that's very important.
Hmm.
Um, Being stressed out while being able to function your weapon properly or use your weapon properly, clear malfunctions, just work under stress, being able to think. Your mind is way more important than your gun. Like your gun is useless if your mind's not telling it what to do.
Yep.
So if you can add some level of stress in a safe environment, I think that's key to training.
Hmm.
So yeah, training is absolutely necessary. That's the one thing that you cannot lack on.
Hmm. I wonder if I wonder if something gets missed in that communication
Mhm.
of a stress shoot. It's so strange, and maybe it's odd, but if we can diagnose issues and people will listen, then we can find better solutions. Because being able to train under stress, absolutely. Perform under stress, absolutely. You have to be able to do that.
Mhm.
The idea of war and conflict and because we're going to get into this in a little bit, like we've seen issues with riots and
Yeah.
civil unrest. There is no ideal scenario. There's
Yeah.
no, there is no, like, there is no Call of Duty esque. That's not the. I can't start that reference because that's gonna just shut down any cognition on it. Um, but it is really the case, and so yes, a stress shoot is does need to see does need to be able to push the student into learning and having some confidence to perform under pressure.
Hmm.
So like a selection process might
Yeah.
just very much so be, are you cool as a cucumber when we're yelling at you all the time and you just keep
Hmm.
going, or do you just clam up and stop moving? Like, do you just
Yeah.
like, oh, analysis paralysis? It's like there's the saying that goes in many forms of selection processes, there is no win condition except for not quitting.
Yeah.
And in other words, you'll be given impossible tasks and see and be evaluated on how you approach them.
Yeah.
It's not about whether or not you pass or fail this event. Some things are pass fail, and some things are intended to make you fail, so that so they watch
How
what
you take
happens,
it?
how
Yeah.
you take it after you fail. Do you like when you fail to meet the standard, which is an impossible standard, to do the thing, and then they start yelling at you and telling you to do push-ups and stuff? Do you die inside and stop functioning, or do you just keep going? Like, well, I'll try it again.
Yeah.
Whatever. Just,
Yeah.
oh, don't you know there? You just keep
Yeah. Hey,
going,
bud.
right? Hey,
Yeah.
bud. But that's a serious question. Do you just quit, or do
Oh
you
no.
pick it up and keep going? Right?
Oh, it's I'll tell you a story which I hope answers this question. I started
Mm-hmm.
doing jujitsu, and no, not. I'm still going to my therapist, right? Because I don't know. There's a running joke that when like a guy that's getting older just randomly starts jujitsu, it's because he's having a lot of problems.
Sure.
But no, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I just want to learn the skill because I've always been kind of
Mid on the mat.
mid on the mat, absolutely. Great way to great way to put that. I'm not afraid to step up, but I will lose.
Mm-hmm.
But so I wanted to get better at that skill just because, I am a very competent shooter. I can confidently say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not always going to be able to use a gun. It's
Yeah.
not always going to be that scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, that's my weakness. Let's work on it. So I was at class and I've always considered, and then obviously being in shape is on that triangle. So I have like fitness is the base of this is like my manly graph, right? My diagrams like of manliness and preparedness. Your base is physical fitness, right? Because it will allow you to do anything. Without fitness, you won't be able to shoot as well. Without fitness, you won't be able to roll as well. So that keeps it all together. It's the base of the pyramid, the foundation. And on top of that, shooting, right? Shooting competency, because at distance and mid range, you need to be able to operate your weapon. You need confidently and competently, um, and on top of that, and not to mention like de-escalation tactics. Like with a gun, you're not just shooting. A lot of people just think, "Oh, if I'm going to carry this gun, I can't wait to shoot somebody." It's like, no, that's like last resort. Like that gun can come out, but that thing ain't talking until last seconds,
Yeah.
because
Well,
de-escalation techniques.
and you and I both know is that that's it's a very interesting, easy thing. If someone says something like that, you absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt that
They're not trained.
they're completely incompetent with their firearm. Like,
Absolutely.
it's just like, if someone, if you're having a conversation with somebody, I guess the audience is probably, I have a great respect for the audience of the show, and
Mhm.
I have reason to assume that there are not going to be anyone who fits this description. But it's like, but if you and I encounter somebody in the world who has that sort of phrase, like, you know,
Shoot first, ask questions later, type of thing.
you immediately know they're incompetent, or
Yes.
or very, at least very unskilled. You're like, okay, cool, you're going to the back of the line. Like,
Yeah.
fine,
Yeah, stay with me.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, like we're not working together.
Yeah, it's not going to happen because
Hmm.
I know you're going to fail when it counts. But so we have shooting competencies, right?
Yep.
De-escalation techniques, and on top, just at the pinnacle, that's where close quarter combat skills come in. Some sort of martial arts, right? Something close distance, because like I said, perfect scenario. I'm not always going to have my firearm, whether that's blade weapons, blunt weapons, and my body. I need to be able to move. So that's like my triangle. That's almost my Laszlo's hierarchy of preparedness needs.
Maslow's. Maslow,
Yeah.
was it Maslov or Maslow? I don't remember anymore.
Maslow.
Yeah, I could
I always
Google it.
mess it up,
Yeah, we
but
all do. That's okay.
yeah. Yeah. But that's
So
that.
your
So
your hierarchy of needs starts with the foundation is fitness,
yeah.
which is certainly a military-ish ranger. That's a very ranger statement. Let's be clear.
Yes, it is very
And then,
ranger. Yes.
but on top of that is shooting skill as well as de-escalation. And then on top of that, this small pinnacle is close quarters combat, CQB. Okay, so you build the pyramid, and for those who are for I think to compare it to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom is like food. So it's like
It's what you need
sustenance.
to survive. It's literally what
Exactly.
you need to
Yeah.
survive.
It's like
Food,
your
water,
body.
shelter.
Yep. Food, shelter. It's basically sustenance and shelter. So it's like
Hmm.
the things that your body will shut down if it doesn't have
Yeah.
food and water, and then shelter, protection from the elements. And so I
Hmm.
live in the desert. It's you can't stand in the sun forever; it'll kill you.
Yeah, you will die. Yeah.
You will die. So that, and then on top of that, there are other things. But
Yeah,
the
security and then
yep,
yeah.
security. But at the very pinnacle, the very top of that hierarchy, yeah, right. Ooh, ooh. The
Yeah.
very pinnacle is like meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
So sense of belonging is higher up there. And so the point on that is like your body literally will stop existing if it's not I don't think I always had a problem with the hierarchy of needs in the sense that I um I thought it was a sort of an imperative, meaning it was arguing that food and water and shelter are more important than meaning and purpose. But what it is in a sense, on the very bottom is like physical necessity, and on the
Mm.
top is individual necessity. So,
Yeah, the interesting part about Maslow's when it was introduced to me in business school
mhm,
was it's more of a graph used for motivations. So
sure.
it's like, what are people? I think it's not necessarily needs to exist, but it's like, what will people be motivated to do or to
Mhm.
take action to accomplish first, right? Why do we get jobs? So we can get money, so we can eat, you know?
Sure.
And yeah, and then it's like,
I mean,
yeah,
I'll also argue that why do we get jobs? Because it fulfills a sense of who we are.
absolutely, yeah.
Which I mean, this is not the right answer. It is not exactly like I'm not making a moral imperative answer. I'm
Oh, no,
saying,
absolutely. No, I
quite
appreciate the
frankly,
perspective.
some like and this has actually been a personal thing too. It's like, well, why do you work a job? Well, I mean, I could do it for money. There's
Mhm.
a lot of
There's a
things you
lot of
can
reasons. I was
a
like,
lot
why
of
would you
things you
work at
can
McDonald's versus, try to get like a big wig six-figure job, you know?
well, yeah, because the big wig six-figure job allows you to brag to your friends that you've got a big wig six-figure
Yeah,
job,
exactly.
which is not the same thing as working to that level to provide for your family.
Hmm.
You know,
No, I got you.
it's
No,
not
it's
simple,
interesting.
but
It's not simple.
that's why I'm bringing that up in the sense of like the military thing is
Yeah. No, I mean,
I'm also self-diagnosing, you know, all the time. So,
yeah. No, it's interesting because like sometimes, like a lot of, I feel like military is very safe. Like people think, um, like joining the military, like how many people are like, oh my God, you're going to die. It's like, well, at least that was my dad, when I joined. He's German, so he's super socialist. So he's like military service was not him. He's a draft dodger,
ah,
and yeah, so he's like he was a musician too growing up, and he still is to this day. He's a musician and a hairstylist, so military's never been like his forte. But like he was like, oh, if you join the military, you're just dying for politicians, and it's just like, okay, well, I think the military is a very safe place to be. Safe place in the context that it gives you everything, right? There is no
everything.
worry anymore. There is no worry. Where's my paycheck going to come from? It's like, where's my house going to come from? Oh, the military gives it to you all. Where's your food going to come from? The military gives it to you.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, being a 20-year-old guy in the barracks, you've got a house, you've got a place to live,
three
put your
hots and
head
a
down.
cot. Yeah, you got a gym.
You got a gym, you got 3 meals a day. You're
Uh-huh.
gonna, you know, as long as you show up at the right time, I guess.
Yeah,
You're
it's
gonna
so safe. It's
it's
so
very
safe.
it's it's very provided for, which
Yeah.
is goes it's easy to go unnoticed with all the other pressures that are going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
it took me getting out and realizing, what the hell is going on? It
Yeah.
was such a lifestyle change leaving the military. And that's when I decided, I was like, wow, the military is a very safe option, a
Mm-hmm.
very, very safe option and that's on the part of identity too, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I got out of the military, I thought, being a ranger, they tell you you're the top, buddy. And it's like, you are. But the second you leave, you are a nobody anymore. It's like nobody cares what you do. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
cares what you did. When I said I was a ranger, they asked me what national park, they
Yep.
just don't care. And it's like you have this superiority complex walking around and I keep going back to rangers make excellent products, right? They know what they're doing. They're war fighters. They're not, we're not good at integrating back into regular society.
Yeah. This
Um,
is the criticism of the Musashi quote, which is it's better to be a warrior in a
the
garden than a
garden,
gardener
the
in a
garden in
war.
war.
And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
no, it's not. It's miserable because we get out of the military, the warrior thing, and it's like it's not it's I don't think Musashi was correct at all. I think he was
I mean, that's
making
interesting.
I I
I'd love to hear this because I enjoy the quote. I think it's a cool bumper sticker.
I mean, there is a small element where I agree on it, but I think it's
Mhm.
way too simple. And that is in the event that there is a war going on, it would be better you don't want to be the gardener. You don't want to be sitting
Yeah,
there, like it when it comes to but it's like but what that doesn't work today anymore because
yeah,
you don't want to be a conscript. Take the Ukrainian conflict, right?
hmm
You don't want to be a guy who's you've basically been a gardener for like 30 years and you're in your mid 50s and then all of a sudden, well, the
you're on the
Russians
front lines.
invade.
Yeah, trench
Now
warfare.
yeah, exactly. That sucks.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? But then like this is the issue that we're dealing with here in the sense
Mhm.
of the gardener in a war will either die or essentially level up and have conflict. He might have PTSD, he might have night terrors, he might have
Yeah.
all
He
these
wasn't
issues.
ready for it.
He wasn't ready for it, but you can't blame him for not being ready for it.
Yeah.
The guy who has pursued being good at war and then finds himself in a place where he is discarded or now irrelevant
He wasn't
is
ready
also
for it. Yeah.
he wasn't ready for it. It's also like that's a dark place to be.
It is
It
very
really is
dark.
because you now have no purpose, no value, at least no feeling of value,
Mhm.
and no
No
community.
friends, no support system.
Yep, no
It's
one gets it. You're like, oh,
yeah.
no one has. You have no connection. So that's why I have a disagreement with it. Like
I like it, yeah.
on the simplest level, let's kind of go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, it's a very foundational thing. It's
Mhm.
very surface level. I don't want to be in a position where I have to defend my life and I've been choosing how to and I've only learned how to grow vegetables.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
right? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But like but it's the caricature of oh, you can snap a dude's arm in 3 moves or less or whatever. It's like this
Yeah.
whole having
Grab
all
my
of
arm.
this
My arm.
whatever
My other arm. Yeah.
or the let's use an example of like well I know how to do I know how to I still know how to plan a night raid. I still know
Mhm.
how to set up and do and perform a night raid. I've been out of the military for 10 years. How many times do you think I've done that? Do you think
In the
that
last 10 years? At
that's
least once, I would hope. Yeah.
done a night raid?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when the IRS audits me, that
Yeah.
$40,000 that I got that one time was not because I raided a meth den and took all
Yeah,
their
right.
cash.
Yeah, down in New Mexico. Um, that's funny. I'm more of a fan of the saying, better to have and not need than need not have.
True, and I
Yeah.
agree, and I think that saying is a lot more a lot more closer to home.
Yeah.
But I'm directing this towards let's kind of change gears real quick into 2020 Summer of Love riots,
Loved it. Was there.
your West
Very rare.
Coast.
Yeah.
Contextually, I was in Minneapolis during that year. My wife and I
Okay.
lived in Minneapolis, and so when I was listening to you on another show. I
hmm
think it was The Bridge with Travis
Yeah.
Haley, and you guys started talking about it. I was like, oh, I have to. I know exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. So you brought this up. You're talking about not only how you thought about like the issues being presented, where people have rights of free speech, and you're not gonna inhibit that, even though
Yeah.
there's disagreements. And then you had you talked about this earlier on this idea of de-escalation. Now, how was did that circumstance build in you a accurate or complete or better way to talk about and present this idea of de-escalation? Because I think the way that uh, let's call it gun culture as well as veterans are caricatured is untrue.
Hmm.
Neither of us put on a gun if we carry, if we neither of us put on a gun every day hoping that we're going to go get into a gunfight. If
Yeah.
I'm case in point, if I'm looking at a restaurant and I think I'm going to get into a gunfight there, I'm not
I'm
going to
not
the
gonna
restaurant.
go
I'm
there.
just not going to go there,
Yeah,
dude.
it's not smart, I'm not trying to become the next Instagram viral, fucking put on a pedestal because I was just somewhere and did what I was trained to do. That's not something I'm looking to get affirmation for.
Sure,
But yeah, the de-escalation thing, um, there's so much more than, I don't think people realize like what happens after you shoot.
sure.
The legal battles you're gonna have to fight. I mean, look at Rittenhouse, for example.
Yep.
That dude. How many years did that dude have to, sit in this, or at least days or months? How long was he in? Was he in the clink for a little bit?
I thought he was in
As
the yeah, the clink. I think he was
Yeah,
in the slammer for 7 months.
yeah,
But I
and
mean,
he's how
also,
old?
but the thing is though, like he'll never be the same. He will
Yeah,
never just be Kyle. It will
no,
always. I mean, there will be exemptions to it, but he will always be Rittenhouse, the public figure.
yeah,
He will always be, you know, he will always be in the sense he will always have to be wary whether or not people he's interacting with are trying
want to,
to latch onto his fame
yeah,
and get something out of him,
yeah.
or if they're genuine, and that's unfortunate.
That is very unfortunate. I met him at Shot Show, and we were like at the cry party, and he was like in the VIP section, and I almost felt bad because I was like, dude, this dude's way too young for this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's what 18 now. He was like
I
17 when it all went down or something.
I think he's approaching 21, but this
Okay, he's
again,
still so young.
but
Like
we're
so
exactly
so
like
young.
but we're still doing the thing. We're still talking about him. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so I want to make sure we not only do the principle but or
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about the
yeah, yeah.
principle, but do the principle.
Sorry, side question right now.
When you were in this situation, you were activated as National Guard, which
Yeah.
uniform
Yep.
concerns. You've got issues. Not only do you have PR concerns,
Hmm.
right? You don't want any of your guys to be the next guy who
Yeah.
smokes a protester and
Yeah.
ends up
Not to
on a
mention the legit PR issues within the unit itself.
sure.
We
But
had
then
guys that were super angry in my
yeah.
unit. It's like de-escalating them to
Oh,
de-escalate other people instead of just being like, you want to burn this place down, go for it.
yeah.
We're still there with a job. So yeah, that was also multi-dimensional.
But I think we need to go back. I think we need to take a step back and
Okay.
readdress the question. Is that like, so you're in a position of leadership at this time.
Yeah.
How did you communicate? De-escalation of force is primarily a moral concern.
Yes.
In just war theory, this idea of proportionality is that the amount of violence that you use in a warfare scenario, there's an appropriateness to it.
Hmm.
And that means constraint.
Yeah.
And we think of it as simply if someone punches you in the face, you don't burn their house down with their family inside.
Yeah.
It's just not proportional.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but what I'm saying in this one is how did you see de-escalation as a skill, and how did you communicate that as a value to your team, and what
Mhm.
were the problems that you faced, and how did you meet them?
Okay. Well, the biggest problem I think right off the bat, at least like as far as risk management, was the ROE we were given. Um, and for ROE for the listeners, rules of engagement, right? Engagement criteria. When am I going to be able to fire, and how should I do it? Um, that was so relaxed. It was so relaxed. It was like they gave us. I remember we were in the Staples Center, and like before we got mobed out, everybody got like a pamphlet, and it was like kind of the Venn diagram where it was like, have a thought. Yes, over here. No, back to the beginning, right? And it was like our engagement criteria was you are allowed to engage if you are stopping, you know, life, limb, or eyesight of yourself or another person. And it's like, so like you're telling me like if one of these protesters is like fucking beating up somebody, I can just blast them, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, that's proportionately not sat right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otherwise, not to mention another problem, these guys aren't full timers. You know, these guys don't live and breathe military. They, you know, a lot of them are students, a lot of them police officers. The police officers were on the police side most of the time. So like you have a guy that works at Verizon store, you know, three and a half weeks, and then comes in for 2 days and does a qual maybe, or sits around and we just sit on our phones at drill and then go home after a long day. You're telling me this guy is not responsible for like making a split decision that could take somebody's life away. That's, to me, that's huge. Um, so that was another problem. But I think um, one of the biggest things was, at least one of the factors is, you know, we're dealing with Americans, and I think, and you know, there we have this whole double sided. We have the left side and the right side, and they always seemingly are just screaming at each other all the time, and they're like, we want to kill this side, and this side wants to kill this side. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Like what you said in the beginning, you're like, you were so tired of people having like, you know, no skin in the game and talking about stuff. And it's just like, you really want to kill your fellow American? That is crazy. Like to
Mm.
me, that is absolutely crazy. I think everyone's a little crazy, but like if we would pass that, right? If we would pass that, we would lose everything we've built up until then, or up until now. As far as like communication techniques, for me, I'm not, like you said, I'm not going to burn down somebody's house that punches me in the face. These most of the protesters, a lot of the rioters were just screaming. That's all they're doing. And you know, if anybody's in a committed relationship, you don't punch your fiance in the face when she's just screaming at you. You listen, and you just, all they want to be is heard, right? That's everybody. That you look at social media, people, why do people comment ridiculous stuff on people's things? Because everybody just wants to say the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going to therapy and counseling, which I highly recommend you do if you're ever trying to find any type of growth. Uh, Go to counseling; it works. But my counselor was like, "We'll talk about some de-escalation techniques to use in arguments," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Well, she's like, "Let's play a game. You just try to be angry at me about something," and I started, you know, being angry at her for, you know, basically role playing and like making up stuff. And the entire time she just repeated what I said and said, "Is this what I'm hearing?" She didn't offer any advice. You know, she didn't offer any. We tend to, you know, be an elitist, and we're like, well, the way you're thinking is wrong because this is right. And it's like people don't care about that. They don't. Everyone thinks they're right. You're not going to change anybody's mind. And if you're trying to change someone's mind, you're just going to get into a bigger argument and you're wasting time. Because at the end of the day, people are going to think about whatever they want to, and you have no control over that. But you can offer thoughts to reflect on. So the entire time, I would sling my rifle because if I had it in front of me, I know for a fact if anything went down, being in Ranger Regiment, I would absolutely shoot them. So that was more, so that was more of a self control thing. So I slung my rifle on my back. I approached my guys. I asked them when I, like, before the huddle, I was like, "Have you guys ever been angry at your life?" And they're all like, "Yeah, yeah, we've been angry." And I'm like, "When you were angry, did somebody just shoot you for being angry?" They're like, "No." And I'm like, "All right, there you go. Let's go out there." Didn't need to. You don't need to sit there and give them a whole General MacArthur speech about how we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it right wisely. It's like, no. It's like these people are literally just angry. Like, you know, for whatever the reason is, whether you agree with it or not, people just literally want to be heard. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, if they're screaming at you, just be like, "I understand your concern. Just please be safe." Right? And that was the entire time. I remember I had like my rifle was slung. I had, you know, M855A1 in all of my magazines. And I'm like, dude, I would love to see like how these work because, you know, they're a new round. It's cool, you know, ballistics. But that shit was slung the entire time. I just had water bottles in my hands. And like every time someone would come up to me, I'd get off the back of the van. I'd go up to a protester, hand them a water bottle. They'd rip it out of my hands, chug it, and tell me to F off. And I just say, "Have a good day, sir." You know, I mean, that was kind of how I handled it at my level.
Mm.
Um, it's it's like a fire, right? If you stop feeding it, it's gonna die. The more you feed it, the more the more you blow on a fire, it's gonna get hotter. It's gonna want to burn hotter. So if you just don't feed it anything, the fire will die. So that was kind of my process for dealing with the entire situation.
You have to, yeah, you have to approach it one way or the other, but you have to approach it in, um, you have to approach those kind of scenarios with a keen understanding of what you're there to do
Yeah,
and what you're not there to do.
yeah. We are
Right?
there to protect the buildings.
You're also not there to be a philosophical conversationalist with
Exactly.
the ideologues who are in charge of the organization.
Yeah. No.
Right. And this is a man, it's such a good topic. The there is no argument in the sense that not it's not that there is no argument. The people in Minneapolis who were doing the looting and the
Yeah.
problems were not good people. They
No.
weren't good people. They were the detritus of society, for
Yeah.
lack of better words.
They weren't there because they were upset about the situation. They
The
were there to be bad people.
Yeah, but then even those who are upset about the situation, when they were upset, that's not when you have a dissertation that you present to them.
Mhm.
So there's timing and appropriateness to these
Yeah.
things.
That was emotional response.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then even then, the value of having an idea of the circumstances and developing an opinion on it and having a set of beliefs on the subject wasn't there to win an argument. It was so that you had a firm foundation upon which you could make decisions.
Mhm.
Very different things. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. You're almost describing it as the purpose of understanding what you believe is so that you may act upon it and act with confidence,
Mhm.
as opposed to act without confidence and
Yeah.
just like a leaf blown in the wind or
Yeah.
a ship tossed by the waves of the sea.
Sure. It kind of goes back to literally where we started here.
Mm-hmm.
We're like going in Afghanistan or Syria, not knowing what the hell was going on.
At all, having
Yeah.
no really good example of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So the so that's I mean it's a good thing to hear. In the was the protesting in your area, how many years did that go on?
Years. We were activated for 10 days.
You were activated for 10 days. Okay.
Yeah, 10 days straight. And it was right when like the peak happened where like buildings were on fire. That's when it was like, okay, we're hitting the streets. So then 10 days, after 10 days, it started to die down. Um, I would assume, I feel like there was some type of protest every year of the anniversary of it.
Sure.
And then not to mention when like the convictions went through, which that was a whole process of appeals and, setting. I mean, that's the court system. It takes forever to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time I haven't experienced anything remotely close to what I experienced when we were activated since.
Yeah.
Then
been
again,
4
I'm
years,
not. Yeah, it's been 4 years. Wow, time flies. That's crazy.
It
Uh,
is. It's been four
Dude,
long.
yeah, it doesn't feel like 4 years.
It does not. No,
Yeah,
Summer of Love was 4 years ago.
that's
It's just
crazy.
crazy. So let's go back and let's tie this let's kind of close this all down because I know that I want to be able to respect your time in this sense, but I've really enjoyed it.
No, it's been good so far. Let's do it.
We got and I think we got one more kind of hump to get through, not to make it even brash, but so you've done a number of things with your life has had chapters, let's call it,
Yes,
right?
I would say so. Yeah.
So you've done we kind of I'm looking at it as like there's technically four, but three-ish broad chapters, four broad chapters. You've got before the military, then you got the military. You got
Yeah.
Cam, the Ranger, Cam, post Ranger, school, trying to figure out something. I don't know what was that like, and then now you've got Cam who did this stuff with the training thing.
Mhm.
Do you look back and see it as chapters, or do you look back and see it differently? And what are lessons that you've learned now that you've been out for some time, or you've been going to do these, because on the one hand you've been out, on the other hand you're actually deeper in than you
I
started.
am way deeper in
You know,
when I started.
what
Yeah.
are some things that you would like? What are some things that you would pass on to yourself, or if you could go
Oh,
back
when I
to
was
being,
younger. Oh
or
man.
even if you could go back to being a team leader,
Yes. Oh,
how
I've had this conversation
if you could go
multiple
back to
times.
being a team leader, how would you change? Who would you be now?
Yeah. Um, so that's a great question. Um, and I've had this conversation with multiple Rangers because like we know how the culture is, right? It's a very toxic culture in
Sure.
Regiment. But it's very good at making a product. And I'm gonna say that multiple times because they are
Hmm.
so good. It just there's a lot of issues I have with it personally as far as like management styles.
Yeah.
Um, just because like there's respecting the rank, not the man. And it's like, okay, well, your team leaders, did you respect your team leader because they're an excellent person and a role model and a mentor, or did you respect them because they were your team leader?
Mm.
Like they taught you how to be a good ranger. They didn't teach you like, you know, how to take care of one another. And it's so hard because, I I didn't think anything was wrong with it until I got out. And then I realized like I cannot act the same way that I acted in Regiment because I will fail. I will absolutely fail. Because like in Regiment, the bigger dick you are, the farther you will go. I feel like that's at least true for what I experience. You're cutthroat. You're an excellent team leader. You don't take crap from nobody. You're good at your job. That will get you far. Um, but obviously, communication styles aren't something we really practice. It's loud, it's aggressive, it's in your face in Regiment, and it works, right? Um, but when I got out, I was like, I can't act like this. I was getting in so much trouble. I got in trouble with the law when I got out because I had the superiority complex because I was an airborne. I am an airborne ranger.
Mm.
That will. I got a DUI when I got out. I got a firearms charge because I was just thought I was untouchable. And I was like, dude, after all that crap, I was like, dude, I need to reel myself back in. Talking with normal people about like not feeling like I did enough overseas, not feeling like I killed enough people,
Mm.
and then just looking at me like this dude's absolutely psychotic. And it's like, and that was my fiance. I remember I was on a date with my fiance, and I was talking about my time in Syria because in Ranger Regiment, your worth is measured in the amount of years you went in and how many deployments you had, not who you are as a person. So like me only having one deployment is like a taboo thing in Regiment, especially I feel like on the outside, I've found a bit of success, and I think people are a little shocked because you have Cam who was in for 4.5 years, did one deployment, just went to Ranger school. Some guys will say I didn't do anything. I had fun in Syria. I had some life changing experiences. But like, never fired my weapon. I shot mortars, but I'm not afraid to be like, hey, I never shot my weapon. I never kicked in any doors. Syria was different. I had some different experiences there.
Hmm.
And like, so I think, a lot of people come after me because they're like, how can this guy have any sort of success on the outside when he's only done those things in Regiment, which, you know, measured on worth, one deployment, that's nothing when the regiment deploys every single year. So I think that's hard for guys to realize, but I understand it. If I had to go back, I would change a lot of things, man. But it's so hard to say like would I get the same product it does now. Like working with a lot of these units I've trained with now, I see like when they get to the squad, they are part of the team when they get there. They're not like expendable. Like regiment almost wants you to fail in a way when you're there. They want you to fail. They want you to be R-fest. That's why the standard is so high. Like the second you can't perform anymore, they throw away. They throw you away, and that's it.
Mm.
That's they kick guys out. You can't do 80% anymore. Here's the negative counseling. We'll try again in 2 weeks, and if you can't pass, you're going to 82nd. And it's like they almost want you to fail, right? It's
Yeah.
like whenever someone's doing good, if somebody takes a team and you don't get it, you're like, screw that guy. Like I'm
Yeah.
coming after him. I want his job. They like, yeah, it's crazy how much they eat each other.
You
But I
see
would,
this. you see this outside of the regiment or outside of getting in or when you're out of battalion as well.
Yeah.
And I think you were bringing it up and someone were looking at you like, how can Cameron be successful? And we do that. We eat our own. We certainly
Yeah,
do.
100%.
There is a level of value that comes from competitiveness. We
Yeah,
push each other to greatness. There is also a toxic element to it,
sure.
and I know the toxic element. The word toxic is such a
Negative
culturally
thing. Yeah.
passe phrase, but there is an element to it where it's like, anytime a guy starts achieving something, how many times have you had this happen where like you are presenting yourself in some way publicly, and some dude's like, "Oh, you weren't a ranger. You weren't a real ranger, dude." I'm,
Yeah, I had to stop reading the comments recently, though. I had to stop because I was so, I'm a little bit of a narcissist. I got a big ego. Like, I like to know that I'm making people happy, so I read the comments.
yeah.
Recently, I had an experience where I'm like, I got to stop reading the comments
Mm,
because, like, you can call me short. I'm short. You can make
mhm.
fun of my receding hairline. Got that regimental quarters. You can make fun of my high pitched voice. That's fine. I was in a regiment. I could take it. But the
Yeah,
second you come after my reputation, like I'm very confident that I did everything to standard, past standard. I was a
sure.
machine gun team leader. I was a fire team leader. I did everything I was supposed to do to the best of my ability. And, I'm confident that the leadership I worked under, appreciated it. I was
Hmm.
good at what I do. And that's the reason I've been able to succeed, in
Hmm.
the military space, being, getting to do all these military things outside of the military, which has been a blessing, absolute blessing. But the second you come after my reputation, I had a comment on Reddit, and I hate Reddit now.
I don't go on Reddit.
Oh
It's
yeah, I had to stop. I had to stop because it was like, first of all, you have no idea who these guys are. They could have, been someone I served with or a 12-year-old who heard this rumor, on YouTube. And you don't know. That's the thing. And there was one comment, and it hurt my feelings. It totally hurt my feelings, dude. And
mm,
that's okay because I'm a man and I have feelings. And it
aw.
said, Cameron Fath is a tool and all of 275 hates him. And I was like, oh, dude, that hurts. Because I was like, well, if like I've done everything in my power since exiting, because I know how amazing the organization is. It's given me a lot of the tools that have helped me succeed, right? So I've literally dedicated most of my adult life, if not all of my adult life, to positively painting this place. And I will, give the shirt off my back to anybody that's still in regiment because they are the guys I look up to, right? The guys that are still doing the job. They're faster than I was. They're smarter than I was. They're more aggressive than I was. They are awesome. Uh, so when you come after that, dude, that hurts my feelings because I literally love that place. It's like everything. So I was like, fuck, I gotta stop reading these comments, dude. I'm like, this sucks. I was like,
Yeah.
Rangers. Yeah.
Well, okay. So, but here's another thing to remember, right?
Yeah.
We said we've already said this part alone, and you're like, okay, so what's the comment? Cameron Fath is a tool, and
Yeah.
all of 275 hates him.
Yeah.
Every ranger hates every other ranger.
I
It's just,
know.
you know what I mean?
It
Like
just is, dude.
now there's a personal level to it where it's like, I've got some good friends I got a couple really good friends that are 375 guys. One of them, I think I kept one really, really, really good friend from Ranger Battalion, and that's one. But
Yeah.
even so, it's like, dude, none of us like each other. So who cares if
Yeah.
they don't? I mean, on the one hand, we do and we don't, but like, you see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, no, I got you.
We already know that we eat our own, and so for
Yeah.
someone to say that all 275 hates you is just saying yes, and water is wet, and the Irish have red hair. You know what I mean? Like it's just like
Yeah,
you know what
dude.
I mean? Like we hate each other when and that is a thing that I would if I could go back to being a team leader, I think I get the same mentality that you're coming around. Is like
Yeah.
I would like to shift if I could go back to being a team leader. The two things that I would do is one of them is that I would start engaging in area studies. Is like, okay, this is where we're going. This is what they speak. This is the local food. This is the travel. These are
Yeah.
this is the avenues of approach. This is what this valley looks like. This is what this environment. These are what these people do. This is what their
Mhm.
religions are. This is what they eat. This is
Yeah.
how. This is where this is a map of
You
the
be an
general area.
educator, you know? It
On
would
the one
help.
hand, I would do that. It's like if I could go back to being a team leader, I would actually go over to like the intel shop and be like, give me one of your guys for like an afternoon and have him
Yeah. That
start
never
filling in.
happened. Yeah.
No, it'll never
Ever.
happen. But it's like that's one thing, and then the other thing I do is I don't know. There's like the other thing that I do is like I think I think I would invite the privates that I'm in to go to church. I think I would have gone to church and invited privates to go to church with me.
Mm,
Those are the two big things I would do
that's
differently.
interesting.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, the privates are a big thing, man. I would have invested a lot more into the privates instead of seeing them as expendable, right? They're like, oh, they either go to school, get their tab, and then they
Hmm.
make it, right? Because that's it. It's like you're not in until you make it.
Hmm.
I
I
think I would
met.
invest a lot more into the privates as
It was
far as
like
their development.
it was like a year ago. I met my private's private.
Yeah, dude, I met at SHOT Show. Like literally, I had a guy at the Odie at the Audi booth. And he was like, I introduced myself. He was like, "Oh, I was a Ranger too." And he was like, "Oh yeah, me too, man." And he was like, "What battalion?" It was like 275. I was like, "Oh, nice. What company?" He's like, "Bico." I was like, "Nice." I was like, "What platoon?" He's like, "Third platoon." I was like, "Oh, nice. Me too, man. When did you get there?" And he's like, "November 2018." I got out in October 2018. He's like, "What's your
Oh.
name?" I was like, "Cameron Fath." He's like, "You're Cameron Fath. You were supposed to be my squad leader." And he's like, all the guys, he's like, "Yeah, your name's still on the board and everything. It was cool." And he's like, "Nice to meet you." And I'm like, "Oh man."
Hmm.
Like I really wish I could have like, I don't know, part of me was like, I wish I could have spent the time and like made sure you had a really good time, you
Hmm.
know? Like it was like, oh, I almost felt like it was my bear cub that I didn't, that I'd never
Oh,
met, And I was like, dude, I want you to be so successful. That's cool. That's cool.
that's good to hear. Well, that's that'll be our exemption. That'll be our example of like quote unquote dad advice of like
Yeah, 100%.
So, but in kind of recapping things, we've talked about we've gone over a whole number of stuff, dude, and a lot of it has to do with identity and who you were before, during, and after the military,
Yeah.
who you're trying to be now.
Hmm.
Um, we've got, and when I say trying to be, I don't mean that derogatory. I mean like
No,
we all
100%. Yeah.
aim at something.
Yeah, we all have goals.
You know, you've got we've talked about even your pyramid fitness shooting and then small unit tactics or fitness
Hmm.
shooting and then everything else.
Yeah,
Um, and I think there's a certain level of discipline.
sure.
I think you brought it up pretty well in the sense of there's a certain level of discipline too. Part of the skill of being able to shoot is knowing when not to.
Yeah.
But then, um, Ranger Battalion, dude, you've got so much going on. It's interesting. It just I want to have another hour long conversation with you, but I just can't. So, uh,
We'll
let's
do a
close
part
with.
2. You wanna do a part 2?
We can always do a part two, man. But
Okay, perfect.
let's close off with the show that's going live
Okay.
and what are if there's what is something that a viewer. Oh, no, that'll be a spoiler. I can't do that either.
Oh, the
What
show's live.
The show's live. Okay,
Yeah,
do
it's
it though.
live right
Like,
now. Yeah, yeah.
well, by the time that this comes out, it'll have been out for a while. If
Yeah.
someone watched the show and if there's one part in the entire show that you're like, don't miss this, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a great one. I'm gonna say this because I think it's a really good example, um, for a lot of guys out there. Watch the Sweden episode. Watch me absolutely fail in the ice hole. So, a little bit of background really quick. I was so sick in Sweden. I came down with one of the worst sicknesses I've ever had. And I had to do all the training, just absolutely miserable. And then we did an ice lake where we jumped in the ice lake, recovered our skis, and like on the snowmobile ride to the lake, like I was feeling like I'm about to pass out already. And I do the ice hole, and then my entire like I do it successfully. I dry off and everything, and you can see like legit pain in my face. Uh, and then it takes me out. It took me out the next day. I couldn't complete the course. They removed me from the SEER school, and my co-host had to go out and do the final mission. Um, at the moment in time, I was like, oh my god, everybody's going to see me fail, and I'm going to be the laughing stock you know. But I think there's a really important lesson in there that like it is okay. It is okay. Everything's gonna be okay because I have 7 other episodes where I crush it and I'm succeeding in everything I do. So I think there's a valuable lesson in knowing when to be an asset and when you're a liability. And then not beating yourself up. I think that's a big thing. Like, just knowing when, enough is enough, not feeling bad about it, and making sure you're being a positive part of the team and not a negative thing. Because if I kept trooping on and went on that final mission, they would be pulling me in a Skedco like the entire time. So, uh, yeah, I think that's a very important thing. You can watch all the Gucci stuff where we're like, fast roping and doing all that cool thing, but I think Sweden is a very important moment because it shows vulnerability, and I think we have a hard time showing that in SOF. So that would be what I say.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
That's what you say. Yeah. Be soft. If you're gonna be in soft, you gotta have to be soft every once in a while.
Yeah, every now and then.
There's a T-shirt for you.
There you go.
Alrighty. Well, hey Cameron, it's been great having you on.
Thanks
It's
for
been great
having me.
having this conversation. Thank you for going through so much for today's audience. Where do people find you? Where is the best way to follow and see where you're going? And
Okay. Well, Forrest, thanks for having me, man. This was an awesome discussion. We will do this again because I enjoyed
sure.
this time. If you guys want to find me, Instagram's probably the best place. Cameron C. Fath on Instagram. You can check me out on kitgod.co. That's kitgod.co. It is my streetwear apparel brand, but it also 10% of all of our sales profit goes towards clothing homeless veterans here in LA. So if that sounds cool, check that out. I used to have a YouTube channel, Kick God Cam. You can find me on there. I'll be uploading some cool stuff. But yeah, I'm just gonna be just a guy being a dude, continue doing what I'm doing, and just put myself out there and see what works and see what sticks.
well, carry on, man. Carry
Absolutely.
on.
Carry
Love
on.
it. All right. So if you're still listening to the episode, if you're still here with us, we'll close off with this. One, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for supporting the show. If you want to jump on what we do, you can always find us at redactedllc.com, or you can find more of the kind of Patreon-ish version at redactedculture.locals.com. It's been dormant for a couple days. We're going to get back into it soon. The other thing from there is if you want to support the show, also go check out Obsidian Arms. They've been kind enough to sponsor this program because they see a value in you guys as the audience and the culture itself. So with that being the case, let's close off. Now go forth and conquer.